What is up, guys? Welcome back to my channel. Today's video is going to be a bit of a doozy. So it's going to be part 3 of my 4-part series on classism and photography. We're going to be covering tiers 5 to 7 on this iceberg that I made. If you missed the first 2 parts of the series, go and check them out. They're on my channel and they're linked below in the description. I'm sorry that this video series wound up being 4 parts. I had intended it to be 3, but there was just too much to say and I couldn't truncate it. Yeah, I realized it's long, but I really appreciate that you guys are sticking with me throughout this series, and I appreciate your interest in this topic. So thank you very much for being here. Thank you very much for commenting and liking this video and subscribing to my channel. And without further ado, I want to jump right in and talk about this iceberg. So in my previous 2 videos, I started by giving kind of an ideological introduction to some of the key terms that we covered in those videos. In part 1, those key terms were classism and privilege, and in part 2, our key term was time. In part 3, our key term is going to be access, and it's a pretty important term for understanding a lot of what we touch on in this video, but it means a few different things as we move further down the iceberg. There's no one explanation for it that I can give in this intro that covers everything without just covering everything. You know what I mean? So instead of going over all of the things that access means when we're talking about class privilege and photography, I want you to just keep that concept of access in mind and look out for it as we move down the tiers that I cover in this video. So let's kick this video off with tier 5. Entry number 1, where you live equals where you can shoot. This is where I'm stuck, unfortunately. This is the tier of the iceberg that is keeping me out. There's no market for fashion photography where I live. Even though it's a decently sized city, it's focused on other things, and that is preventing me from working as a fashion photographer. I feel like I'm on the outside of the industry looking in, with my face pressed up against the window, wondering how everyone else got inside. But I feel like I already kind of know how. They moved to LA or New York. This is an exaggeration, right? There are a lot of great photographers who live in other places, obviously, but you can't deny that pretty much every famous artist you can name has lived in one of these places at some point in their career. Remember last video when I talked about Tyler Shields and referenced this interview? Well, there are a few zany, offhanded remarks in that interview that do really give me pause, but here's one of them. So he talks about how he first got into taking pictures of celebrities. He says he first shot this model, Caroline Demore, and she went on to introduce him to a bunch of her celebrity friends at a party. He says that because she was famous and dating another famous guy, they were all able to skip the line to this party. A line that was about 400 people long, apparently. And so he gets into this party, which is absolutely packed with celebrities. He says he knows everyone in the room. And so he sits down with this model and her famous boyfriend and gets talking to him. And then he skips ahead in the interview to the first time shooting with this guy and talks about how he chose to do something really wacky and creative and got a photo of him jumping off a building. And the way he says this, I don't really know how to convey this to you, but you can go and watch that part of the interview. This story starts at 21:24, so see for yourself. But the way he says this is almost as if his decision to photograph this famous guy in a wacky way jumping off a building is what got him started shooting celebrities. And not the fact that he has access to an entire party full of celebrities, which he was able to get into with an entourage of other celebrities. You can take wacky, creative pictures of people jumping off buildings anywhere in the world, but you can only find an entire party of celebrities in Los Angeles. And I'm sure there's other places, but you know what I mean, right? I could walk into the most exclusive, high-end nightclub in Vancouver, and it would still just be full of coke-addicted finance bros and college-age corporate heiresses. And I could post a picture of one of them jumping off a building, and it would get 48 likes on Instagram, and that would be the end of it. So the secret ingredient in Tyler's success is not his wacky, creative, risk-taking bootstraps. It's his access to the rich and famous. I had a whole bit written here about why Los Angeles and New York are the best places to live if you want access, but I think we all kind of know that and maybe kind of know why. If you want to shoot fashion, you have to go where fashion happens. And if you want to shoot portraits of famous people, you have to go where famous people are. And if you want to shoot luxury cars and interiors, you get what I'm saying, right? And it's not just LA and New York, you know? It's giant, world-renowned global cities with lots of big and small spaces for capitalistic art to proliferate. they are going to have a lot more opportunities for success in photography than small, out-of-the-way cities that are focused on other things. And unfortunately, most cities, most places, are in the latter category. So remember in the first video when we talked about Lindsay Adler? Well, she's from New York. And this guy we talked about last week with the garage, he's in LA. How about we return to this collage of the highest paid photographers in the world? Well, where do they live? Annie Leibovitz started in California, and now she's in New York. And George Steinmetz, he was born in Beverly Hills, and now he lives just outside of New York. And Cindy Sherman, New York. And Joel Merowitz, New York. So why don't we all just up and move to New York if we want to become famous photographers? Well, let's talk about that really quick. The average rental price for a one-bedroom in New York City is $3,800 USD per month. That's just over $5,000 Canadian. And to own in New York, oh my god, it's about $1,000 per square foot, $1,300 Canadian. A square foot is like that. So every floor tile in your apartment is $1,000. What about Los Angeles? Okay, well, the average rental price for a 780 square foot apartment in Los Angeles is $2,781, which is closer to $3,700 Canadian. I'm giving these figures in Canadian dollars as well, and that's because a good chunk of my viewership is Canadian, and I'm Canadian, and it is harder for Canadians to move to these big global cities because our money is literally worth less there. So saving up enough money to move to New York City and try to make it as a freelance creative and just hope it pays off before you go bankrupt is insane. Unless you have a pretty huge safety net to fall back on. And who has huge safety nets? Generally not regular working class people. It's people who are already well off, people who already have the financial freedom to take risks. It's almost like moving to these famous cities chasing a dream is a class privilege, right? Putting yourself in a situation where you can make it big as a photographer, or make it big as anything, is a class privilege. And from where I am, I can see what I need to do to advance my career, but I can't do it. I have this vision of my future where I save up money for a few months and then spend a month in the States getting as much work as I can before flying home. And maybe I'll do that a lot, maybe every season, and then I don't have to pay those exorbitant rental prices. I can just pay for a cheap hostel. But everything in the States is horribly expensive as a Canadian, and even getting permission to work in the States costs more than I might be making at first. So I need to be financially successful here first, to save up money to go there. And since I'm going there in the first place because I'm not able to be financially successful here, well, that's a bit tricky, right? Let's talk about the next item on this tier. Travel is expensive. So maybe you like my plan. You like the way it sounds. Work really hard, save up a bunch of money, and then travel the world taking photos. Get work in exotic places with currencies that are valued higher than your own. Sell those photos or make new connections or whatever. Build up your portfolio and your reputation as a photographer along the way. This plan is expensive. It's expensive. It does seem to work for some people though, if you can afford to foot the bill. There's this genre of photographer, particularly photojournalists, who will save up and travel the world and live this nomadic lifestyle of adventure and take bold and unique photos of the people they encounter and places they visit. It really is the dream if you could afford it. You've seen this picture before, I'm sure you have. The guy who took it, Steve McCurry, he wasn't born in LA, he was born in Philly, but he decided to travel the world and he made his way through a lot of grand and dangerous adventures and eventually snapped this photo, which he then had to smuggle out of Afghanistan. He really earned this photo. It's a crazy story if you hear the whole thing, but in the years after snapping this photo, he went on to travel the world, snapping amazing photos for National Geographic, and is now one of the most highly paid photographers in the world. How about another famous success story? We've got Lindsay Addario, not to be confused with Lindsay Adler. Addario is much cooler. We talked about her in my Ukraine war video, and she was born in Connecticut, but traveled to Argentina, where, with little to no photography experience, she got a job shooting for a local paper and kicked off her career as an international photojournalist. Or how about Gabriel Galimberti? We talked about him in the Balenciaga video, remember? And his career is also built on travel. He travels the world photographing these large-scale documentary projects, and most of them are entirely personal projects that he is not actively getting paid for. So there is a way to photograph amazing things if you live in a boring place, and that way is to travel somewhere else. And if you do have a lot of time and money on your hands, well, great, you can take this route. And if you do, I think you'll find that it's actually not that simple. How do I know? because I know people who have taken this route and still hit a barrier, and I am trying to take this route to the best of my ability, and I'm still hitting a barrier. I've paid my way through the iceberg so far. I've bought all the gear and spent time teaching myself how to use it and traveling the world and shooting for free. And with all of these expenses, I have bought myself a peek behind the curtain, and I'm seeing something upsetting about this industry. Something that I'm going to share with you in Tier 6 and 7. Tier 6. I haven't talked much about what the tiers are actually called. I've named them all, I don't know if you noticed, but I want to talk about this one. It's called Modeling Success, and I think this is a lot bigger in this industry than people realize. I'm going to blast through this tier a little bit because you've probably already seen what's coming in Tier 7, but I want to take a minute to talk about what modeling success actually looks like. So entry number 1 on Tier 6 is dress for the job you want, not the job you have. I'm going to put this a little bit more simply and say dress for success. So there's a few meanings to this entry, but in a literal sense, you have to dress like a successful person to be perceived as a successful person. This is true in all industries, but photography, particularly fashion photography, is especially based on aesthetics. It's like the expensive wine thing, right? In a blind test, if people think one wine is expensive and the other is cheap, they're much more likely to prefer the expensive one, even if it's the same wine in both glasses. I have this fake Louis Vuitton sweater that I wear to fashion events and when I'm taking street portraiture, and I've had interactions where I ask somebody for their photo and I see their eyes go from my camera to my sweater and then back up to my face before they agree to be photographed. This happens often enough that I think of the sweater as like a piece of equipment almost. It's a tool in my arsenal that I can use to capture the photos that I want and to gain the access that I wouldn't otherwise have. Once you start looking for them, you'll see these tools all over the fashion industry. There's the fashion photographer uniform of black, white, or navy blue tailored clothing, and it's often punctuated by small but noticeable marks of class privilege. A pair of designer shoes, a watch, a Gucci belt, things meant to communicate one's socioeconomic status in a subtle yet noticeable way. Now, you might look at the classic old guy in the photographer pit wearing a button down and a ball cap and think, look at him, he's successful and he's not curating anything about his appearance, so clearly this can't be as true as you think, Yvonne. Well, yeah, but he probably got his start as a photographer at a time when the industry was far less saturated than it is now, and he probably also isn't as successful as you think he is. We'll get to that. But also, he typically has a different kind of tool that is used to send a message about his financial success in photography, and that is his actual equipment. Most people don't know how much cameras cost, but they know that the bigger it is, the more expensive. When you see a guy with a camera like this and a lens like this, you know pretty quickly that he spent a lot of money to own them, and therefore, he must be successful enough to foot that kind of bill. He may not be wearing a $500 Gucci belt, but he is carrying a $10,000 camera, and I feel like that's doing a pretty good job of modeling and signaling success nonetheless. And unfortunately, this act of modeling and signaling success is yet another thing that's locked behind a paywall. Anecdotally, I've actually noticed that the way I am perceived as a photographer changes depending on which lens I'm shooting with. When I'm wearing a camera with my 24 to 70mm lens, people are much less suspicious of me asking for their photo and are much more willing to engage with me at high-end events. When I'm wearing my 50mm lens, on the other hand, I get told no a lot more often. And people ask me why I want the photo, as if it isn't self-evident that I'm a photographer. So all of this, put simply, an important part of achieving success is signaling to other people that you already have it. So this leads me into the next entry on Tier 6, which is faking it until you make it. Which is basically dressing for success, except instead of just using your clothes and equipment, it's your entire attitude. I interact with a lot of photographers who do this kind of badly. They will immediately tell you about all of the fantastic people and places they've been and shot, and maybe open their Instagram to show proof. They'll talk in this nonchalant yet boastful way, as though it's all very casual, even though it's all they talk about. And honestly, this kind of ties back into the utility of shooting for free. Because shooting for free is a good way to build your portfolio, yes, but it's also a good way to look like you're getting lots of work. And depending on who or what you're photographing, it can be a very good way of pretending that you're scoring high-profile clients. Maybe the only reason why you were able to capture C-list celebrity is because you offered to do it for free, but nobody else has to know that. And hey, now you can whip out your phone and show other people that you do in fact photograph celebrities. And if famous people trust you to do a good job, then surely regular people should too. Now, the more I work in this industry, the more I travel around the world and meet different photographers at different events, the more I realize how pervasive this fake it till you make it set of behaviors really is. I'm peering behind that curtain and I'm realizing that everyone is faking it. Tier 7, Entry 1. Everyone is faking it. Do you want to see some of the best photos I took at New York Fashion Week? I took all of these for free. And at Paris Fashion Week. All of these were free too. And at Vancouver Fashion Week. Yeah. Now, at first, I thought, damn, I am such a sucker. I am flying all the way around the world just to work for free, and all of these other people are out there making bank. What are they doing that I am not? And so I started asking some of the other photographers who I met along the way. I talked to 15 different photographers at Paris Fashion Week at 3 different off-calendar events by different organizations, and none of them were getting paid. 3 of them took out their phones to show me their catalog of celebrity portraiture and 100,000 follower plus Instagram accounts, but here they are still paying money to fly to Paris and work for free. A year ago, I would have seen a profile like that and thought, dang, that's exactly where I want to be in 5 years. Until I asked them how they managed to book a paid runway gig and they got all cagey telling me that they were shooting for personal use. The more I talk to photographers who appear successful, the more I've come to realize that the pool of people who make a full-time income on photography is incredibly small. Most of the photographers in any given pit or at any given event have day jobs, even the guys with $11,000 worth of camera gear. Although most of them, I guess, now have pensions. You watch those make 6 figures in your photography business today guru videos on YouTube, and all of them talk about diversifying your revenue streams, starting a YouTube channel or selling stock photography or using affiliate links. They do that because the actual photography part of the business, booking clients and shooting gigs, doesn't make 6 figures. Unless you do weddings. But if you do weddings, I think you're trading years of your life. I'm kidding, but I actually think that architecture and weddings are like 2 of the only genres of photography that people can actually make money in. And architecture has like a whole other set of classes barriers because you need really specialized equipment for it. I digress. When I said earlier that I've peeked behind the curtain and realized something upsetting about this industry, this is it. A lot of the photographers who look the most successful, who model all of the hallmarks of success, actually don't get paid in money. They get paid in those hallmarks. Basically, they're getting paid in clout, which brings me to the next entry, getting paid in clout. Now, this is not how it looks at the high end of photography. No, but this is absolutely how it looks among working class people attempting to use photography to climb the ranks of the social hierarchy. You shoot an influencer, you get paid in followers. You shoot a celebrity, you get paid in shots for your portfolio. You shoot a fashion show, you get paid in a title and legitimacy. Now you have a lot of followers, and you have a celebrity in your portfolio, and you have the ability to say that you shot at Milan Fashion Week. So now you have the legitimacy to shoot even bigger influencers and get even more followers, and shoot even more famous celebrities and get even more recognizable faces in your portfolio, and shoot even bigger shows and get even more impressive credentials. But the actual financial compensation to all of this is comparatively small, if any. Ask any normal working class photographer with a celebrity in their portfolio, and you'll see what I mean. The things in photography that actually make money aren't flashy or impressive or even worth putting in your portfolio. They're things like corporate gigs and school portraits and JCPenney style family photos. And the people who make money off of those usually aren't even the photographers themselves. It's the people running the photography companies, whether or not they actually take the photos. The money is in management, it's not in photography. What we see online as evidence of photographers being successful in this art and making millions and pulling themselves out of poverty, well, it's an illusion. And it's a necessary illusion. I mentioned a minute ago that I talked to many photographers at Paris Fashion Week who were shooting for personal use at off-calendar shows. And I say off-calendar because these shows weren't the big names. They're not Valentino or Gucci or Tom Ford. They were shows that were accessible to the working class, the ones that don't get included on the official Fashion Week calendar. And this is where I think the biggest classist barrier really hits. I think that it is at this entry that the ranks of working class photographers who've made it down this far will get filtered out. Because the things that actually make money, the shows, the clients, the gigs that pay big bucks, aren't for you. You won't find their contact info anywhere online. There's no reaching out and offering your services. There's no cold calls or email addresses or even buying access. Even if you move to New York and you hustle your ass off and you go into debt buying gear and traveling around the world, you will never be discovered if you don't already know the kinds of people who do the discovering. You won't have an easy opportunity to take photos of the rich and famous if you don't know people who are rich and famous. It's not a paywall, it's a class wall. And the gulf between us, the working class, here shooting our off-calendar shows, and the corporate empires that service the elite and spend $50,000 on photo shoots, that gulf is an ocean, and you will drown trying to swim across. So the last entry on Tier 7 and the last piece of the iceberg that I'm going to talk about today is social status to network with the right people. Okay, so back to Tyler Shields for a second. In the first part of his interview, Tyler Shields says that he got his start because he had a list of famous people's phone numbers, and he called them all up and lied to them about the services that he could provide, and one of them happened to take him up on his offer. He says that he called Steve Jobs, Bill Gates, Hulk Hogan, Ghostface Killah, and Magic Johnson, apparently among others. And he says that he was able to do this because he's never been afraid to hear the word no. Gee, Tyler, I think there might be a bit more to it. I feel like having a list of celebrity phone numbers might be a bit more of a factor in booking celebrity clients than your willingness to call and ask them. What Tyler Shields had that you don't is that list. He had access to those people, the social status to network with them. And that's not something you can really buy or even earn. You can work all of your life and never earn enough money to buy access to Bill Gates' phone number. Because it's not a matter of what you have, it's a matter of who you are born as, and which side of that gulf you're born on. And if you're born right, I guess you can just get access to those people while stumbling through life at the beginning of your career. Brooklyn Beckham shot his first Burberry campaign at age 17. And it's not because his photography is incredible, it's actually kind of terrible. It's because he was born to the right people. I don't actually know much about Tyler Shields' upbringing and his family, but there's enough context clues in this interview to determine that it wasn't very working class. Mediocre photographers with famous friends in famous places are always going to be more successful than fantastic photographers who are just regular working class people. And anything that argues to the contrary is part of that necessary illusion. There's this thing, okay? This feeling that if you just work really hard and do absolutely everything right, there's a chance that you can punch through that classist barrier. You can break that wall. And your work will be so amazing that it will speak for itself. Maybe you'll impress the right people at the right time and they will help pull you up to where you deserve to be. This feeling that you are the exception to the rule, that everyone else who's failed on the path that you're walking just doesn't want it as bad as you or isn't willing to do what you're willing to do. You might think that you are able to succeed where others have failed because if at least one other person in your position has succeeded, so can you. That feeling, bear with me here, that feeling is an important mechanism in capitalism. It is a key part of how capitalism perpetuates itself. It's a key reason why the working class will so often defend the interests of the economic elite. I may not be rich and famous now, but someday I will be if I work hard enough. I won't tolerate any political systems that make it difficult for the economic elite to exist, because that would in turn make it difficult for me to exist in this future role that I imagine for myself. You might even see this in the comment section of this video. People hate it when you talk like this. Admitting that punching through that classist barrier is impossible is called defeatist. It's called unmotivated or lazy. How often do you hear that term, lazy, being used against people who criticize capitalism? All of these make six figures in your photography business gurus are profiting off of this fantasy of exceptionalism, off of this necessary illusion, right? It is wealth porn disguised as a how-to guide. Look at the comments on this Tyler Shields video that I've been referencing this whole time. Look at the comments. Look how many people are inspired by this story, changed by this story, motivated to work harder, longer, do better by this story. We see a system, capitalism, that is working people into the ground, and people are working even harder to escape it. In doing so, modeling success, faking it till they make it, they're contributing to the illusion that such escape is actually possible. These success stories aren't examples of people beating the system, cracking the code, and making it big despite the odds. No, they are fundamentally necessary for the system to continue. They reinforce the mechanics of capitalism at its very core. Stories like this give people something to work for, a justification for overwork, an aspiration, a light at the end of the tunnel. Why are high-profile artists, celebrities, and entrepreneurs so big, so important in capitalism? It's because they represent an escape from capitalism, and not a revolutionary escape, not one that threatens the system in any way, but an escape through work. Work that perpetuates capitalism and leaves people too burnt out, too exhausted, too distracted to actually participate in real revolutionary action, to actually work towards an escape from more than just themselves. At every stage of this iceberg, you are spending money to chase a dream. You're buying expensive items from giant corporations, participating in globalization and resource extraction, travel-related emissions, and you're reinforcing celebrity culture and brand worship, working for free just for the privilege of working for money, working with the hope of one day serving the elites more directly. At every stage, you're playing the game of capitalism to the absolute best of your ability, chasing the illusion that if you play it right, one day you'll actually be able to cut yourself free and spend your days making the art that drove you here in the first place. It's like that in all art. All careers, really. There's always people hoping to use their career to climb above their socioeconomic class, but there's something extra special about photography that makes it even more vital in perpetuating the capitalist system than any other form of art. And I'm really saving the best for last here because I'm going to talk about that next week in part 4 when we cover tiers 8 to 10. Cue the outro music. I know this video is like very intense. Sorry about that. I hope you still like photography after watching this video. I just really hope that you're thinking hard about some of the concepts that I'm presenting in this series. I really want you to critically engage with this. I personally need to critically engage with this a bit more, I think. It's been a really interesting series, writing and scripting and researching for it and all of this. Thank you guys for bearing with me through this super long series. There's one more part left to come next week. I'm really looking forward to getting into some of the things that we're going to be talking about. There are things that I've been thinking about for months and months and months. I also really want to hear what you thought. If you have comments, questions, concerns, please leave them down below. I do read every single comment on my videos. Sometimes it takes me a bit longer to respond to more thoughtful comments because I always want to give them a really thoughtful answer, but I do respond eventually. So thank you for engaging with this, and not just this video, but this topic. See you next week. And in the meantime, I want you guys to stay sharp and don't forget to keep shooting. Bye guys.